Yeah, so on Kuf Chavav Amid Beis, toward the bottom, about to start a new interesting topic. Amar Avami, Tumtum Shenikra. A tumtum is a kind of gender issue, someone who's born with a covering that makes it that you can't see whether they're a Zachar or Nekeva. So that means the person is either a Zachar or Nekeva. They're not an androgynous. An androgynous is someone who has simanim. It's a mixture of both. But this is someone who is either a Zachar or Nekeva, but there's some kind of covering that makes it impossible to see. So this child was born as a tumtum, shenikra, and it was ripped open, the covering, and it turns out that there is Zachar. If this child was a Bechar, was the firstborn, he doesn't have the din of getting Shnayim. He doesn't get double. The Amar Krava Haya ben Bechar Lasniya. The pasuk that talks about, we've come across, we've seen this pasuk a few times. A person has two wives, one who he loves and one who he hates. And the one who's hated, who he hates, has a son who's a Bechar. You have to give the Bechar, goes to the Ben Hasnu. The one who's the Bechar. But the Torah used the Lashon, V'haya ha-ben ha-Bechar. The one who's the Ben ha-Bechar, he's going to get the Pishnayim. So we darshan, Ajihe ben mishas havaya. V'haya tells you that it has to be that it was not just that he was a Ben, but that it was knowable. It was clear that he was a son, that we could determine that he was a son from the time that he was born. That excludes a tumtum. So a tumtum does not get the pishnayim of a bechar. Nachma Yitzchak Amar, another din for a tumtum. Af ini nidin keben sayru mayr. He's also excluded from the din ben sayru mayr. If a son, steals and he eats large amounts of basra and yayin, there's a special din of ben sayru mayr. So Torah says, the Gemara is saying that doesn't apply it only applies to a son. It doesn't apply to a daughter. In addition to not applying to a daughter, it also doesn't apply to a son who's a tumtum. The Amakrava Chiyah Leish ben Sayru Mayra. Also Lashon Yiyah. Ajiyah ben Mishas Havaya. It has to be known that he was a son from the time that he was born. Another din about a tumtum. Ameima Omer Aveinu Memayit Chelik B'B'Chayra. Also, a tumtum will also not be counted when we're trying to make the calculation of how much a bechar gets. So let's see the top Rashbam where we go through what the cheshbon is. If you have, if a man has a son or a child and it turns out that he's a zachar, he's first a tumtum and then he finally is zachar. Imu pashet. So if he's a regular son, he's not a bechar. And the father has $900 and the father is now dying. There's three sons. Banim, upashat for tumtum. There's a bechar, and then there's a regular son who's not a tumtum and he's not a bechar. And there's also tumtum. The youngest kid is a tumtum. You have to divide up the 900 into three parts, because we're going to ignore the tumtum. Tumtum command the lesson, and the tumtum is disregarded. The bechar gets 2 chalakim. If there's 900, you divide it into 3 parts, and you say an equal part to the bechar and an equal part to the pashat. The tumtum is disregarded, and then a second part goes to the bechar. So that comes out to 300 to the pashat and 600 to the bechar. So then what will happen? I didn't say it correctly. So the bechar first gets 300, right? Because he's getting his chelik ha-bechar. But then the tumtum is not excluded from getting Yerusha. He's just excluded in the cheshbon of how much the bechar gets. So now you have 600 left over, and that 600 gets divided amongst the 3 brothers, the bechar, the pashat, and the tumtum. So 600 divided by 3 is 200. Bein shlosh nimtza b'char noitel chamisha manim. V'atumtum ha'pasha noitel kol echad shnei manim. So the end result is the Bechara gets 500, and the two other brothers each get 200. The Bechara, the Tumtum, in the end is determined to be a Zachar. He's fully entitled to get Yerusha. He's just, according in this pshat, first of all, he's excluded if he's a Bechara from getting double, and he also was excluded from the Cheshbon in figuring out, according to the Shita from a Meimer, to figure out how much the Bechara gets for his Pishnayim. Aval, you have a Mayit. But if the tumtum was memayit, if he was part of the cheshbon for the chelik habachar,
you meaning if there were just
if we didn't say like a memar,
there were three kids, right?
You treat him like a regular son,
right?
Then what would the cheshbon be? The bachar would only get 450 in total, not 500 in total. Pishnayim keneged kol echad, which is double for everyone else. Meaning you basically divide it up into four portions, which is 225 for each, and then the bechar gets double. So he ends up in this, according to Ameimer, if you exclude the tumtum from the original cheshbon of the chelik of the bechar, the bechar ends up getting a little bit more. Where do we learn this out from? Until he's a ben b'shas leida, and since this child is not right, this is the part where we say we cheshbon that we give to the bechar, and he's going to have banim. So we say you give to the bechar pishnayim. So yoldolei banim, but a tumtum is not included in yoldolei banim to reduce the amount of that the bechar is entitled to. That's the third din that we said legabe tumtum. Fourth din, Rav Shizbi Amar av ein nimel l'shmoina. He also doesn't have a din to be nimel on the 8th day. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean he doesn't get a bris on the 8th day. What it means is, like Rashbam says, and the Gemara is going to make clear later, he doesn't have a din if the 8th day is Shabbos, that the mila is deicha Shabbos. The Torah, because the Torah says Isha says the Amar Kra Isha kisazriya v'yalda zacha b'yayim hashmini yimel. Only someone who is a Zacha Mishas Leida has which we have a whole drasha, I think, in Shabbos, Masechta Shabbos, about how we learn out. That means even when the 8th day is Shabbos. But that doesn't apply to a tumtum. A fifth din of a tumtum, Rav Sharbi Ama'af ein imoy Tamea Leida. His mother, the mother of a tumtum, does not have the din of a Tamei Leida. Now, just to remind, there's the dinim of Tumah Leida like this. If a woman has a baby, she becomes Tameh. And this is not the din of Dam Nida. It's not because of Riyas Dam. It's a din of Leida when she gives birth. And it depends. If it's a daughter, she's Tameh for 14 days. The Zacha, she's Tameh for 7 days. And part of this din, this is like a little bit of a misnomer. We say ein imay tmei leida. There's also a special din taira that comes along with giving birth. That after the end of the days of leida, of tuma, there's a bunch of days taira. So for a boy, someone gives birth to a boy where she's going to be tummy for 7 days, she's then going to be tar for 33 days. And even if she's raya dam midaraisa, she's going to remain tar. And by a daughter, it goes for 66 days. It'll go to up till 80 days. She's going to remain tar. We're not, obviously, we have to be clear. This is not midrabanan. We're not noig like this. We say a woman remains tummy. We treat dam leida as dam nida, and we could do all the chumras of dam. And there's no, we're not noig with the mei taira. But in any case, all of this is not noyik. He says, the Gemara is saying, according to Rav Sharbia, it's not noyik when someone gives birth to a tumtum. So therefore, the woman will not become tameh at all, neither 7 days or 14 days. And additionally, she's not going to be tired at all. She's not going to have the din of be made tired. The Amakra, Isha Kitazriya v'yalda zacha. The Tama Shivas Yom Machi Zacha Mishas Leida. This same pasuk that we said, Isha Kitazriya v'yalda zacha b'yayim hashmini yimel. another part of that pasuk. The next pasuk is, I mean, the first pasuk actually is, that she v'tama shivas yom achi zacha. So it says v'tama shivas yomim. It's only isha kisazriya v'yolda zachar. But if she's not yolda zachar, meaning that we don't know that it's a zachar, she doesn't have the din that she's tummy. Meisvei frektingmara. Pelis tumtum v'androgynous. If someone has a stillborn tumtum or androgynous, and then we find out afterwards, no, so we don't know. We bury it. We don't know what it was. Teishev l'zachar l'nekeva. The mother should have the tumas leda for both a zachar and a nekeva, meaning there's going to be 14 days of tumah, and the day from the 7th to the 14th is going to remain tameh, in spite of the fact that it would be yemei taira for a zachar. This clearly is saying that we are noyeg yemei tumah for a tumtum, and he had said you don't. Tiyufta. Gemara says it's taka good kasha. So Gemara leimet havi tiyufta der Rav Shizbi. Rav Shizbi is coming from the same pasuk. Rav Shizbi said the din that a tumtum doesn't have the din that he is his 8th day is doicha Shabbos, because it says isha kisazriya v'yolda. That's the same isha kisazriya v'yolda that we said tells you that there's no din of tumah. So if we're saying that we don't have the din isha kisazriya v'yolda that excludes a tumtum from the din of tumah, it should also apply that he doesn't have the din of that he shouldn't be included, that he's excluded from his milah being daicha Shabbos. Zaktamar no. Tana safuki mesafkale ulachumra. Where it says no. That which we said that we brought from the Brisa, that was not out of certainty. It wasn't that we know that he has a din of both the zachar and the keva. It's a suffix. We're not sure about whether the din applies, whether when it says isha kisazriya, it's coming to exclude a tumtum. And since we're not sure, therefore he has to observe the chumrah of both a son, a isha, and of a zachar and a keva. But over here we're talking about that a tumtum is excluded, that he is not able to be deicha Shabbos he's not able to be deicha Shabbos on the 8th day, that we have to suspect that maybe he is excluded, and therefore you can't do the milah on Shabbos. The Gemara says, if that's the case, that was saying you have to be wary that maybe this tumtum is a zachar and a keva, and therefore there's a yemei tumah of both through 7 and 14 days, all the way through 14 days. But we should also worry that maybe when she becomes a nida afterwards, that maybe she's takanat a zachar and a keva. So even if she becomes a nida within 40 days, it says teishev l'zachar and a keva. It's mashma that we can only give her. She has 14 days of tumah, but she also has on the other end she only has 40 days of tahira. But the Gemara is saying she shouldn't have any days of tahira, because maybe the din of a tumta means that she doesn't get at all the din of tumas leda, and then the din of nida will be able to apply. So you shouldn't say she gets a din of teishev zach and nekeva. It should be you also have to worry about nida, because maybe she's not a zach, she's not a tumas leda, doesn't have the din tahira. Kasha, it's taka good kasha. Amarov. Tanya Kavasa Deravami. Now we're going back to the first din that we had said, that a tumtum shenikra v'nimtza zacha and a neitel pishnaim. He doesn't get double as a bechar. I'll bring you right to this. Ben v'loy tumtum. We have a brisa that says a son and not a tumtum, which means that a son bechar v'loy safek. So ben v'loy tumtum k'deravami. So the din that we say a son v'loy ben, meaning v'haya ben habechar lasniya, we say that means he gets double. So we're saying, but that's only a ben and not a tumtum. What is the second din? Ela bechar v'loy safek lafuke mai. What is this din when we say that a bechar and not a safek? What is that excluding? We already said the din that a tumtum is excluded. La'afukim b'didarish Rava. It's coming to exclude from Rava's drasha, which, just to clarify, we're going to say a din from Rava, and we're going to say that it's because of this brisa, we have to clarify what Rava really was chayzer and what he said, and he said it only applies in some circumstances. So, Darish Rav, shtei nashim sheyoldu beis charim b'michva. If there were two women who were married to the same man, and they both gave birth to boys, and these were the first boys born to this man, the first children, and they were in a cave, they were in hiding. So we don't know which son was born first. They were in a room, and after the next morning, they both popped out, and they said, "Oh, look, I have a boy." We don't know what time they were born, which was first. So eventually these boys grow up, and the father dies, and he's a Rockefeller, and there's $10 billion at stake. And who gets Pishnayim? Happens to be there's 5 other sons. So these two boys say, listen, we between the two of us, one of us definitely deserves double. So we want to get something out of this bechira. So Kaisven Harsha Zelazeh. Each one writes to the other one, essentially, that he's appointing him his shliach to collect on his behalf. That means, let's say there was, like we said, let's say this, let's make it the case we had before. There were, I don't know, there's $900, and there's 3 sons. These 2 plus 1 other. So if they can get double, so you can divide it up into 4 sections, right? Let's say it was $1,000. So each they'll get 250 each as a pashat. The other 250, the 2 that claim to be bechayrim will split it amongst them, and they're going to get more. The other, so they'll get 375 each, and the other one will get 250. But if they just let things be, then each will get 333. So by each one appointing the other one a shliach to collect on his behalf, when they go to the third brother, the other brother, and they say, listen, I want to get my bechar, and he says, I don't know, how do you prove that you're a bechar? He says, listen, I don't know if I'm the bechar, but I have a harsha from the other possibility, so you can't say because I'm representing all possible claimants to the bechar. So Papa asked Rava, I asked about this specific question, where there are 2 brothers and we don't know which one is the bechar. It wasn't clear. My Rabbi didn't have an answer. Baram, however, Kach Amru, Mishra Rav Yanai, they did have a memory from Rav Yanai. Hukru l'b'soifnis arvu koshven harsha zelazeh. Lo yukuv ein koshven harsha zelazeh. They said that there is a case where you could write a harsha. That's not this case of a michvah. That's the case where there were 2 brothers, and one of them was the bechar, but over time it was forgotten who was the bechar. So originally we knew who was the bechar, but then it got lost in the midst of time. So in that case, they can make a harsha one to the other. But the case of Rava, where it was never known, ein chanami, they can't write a harsha because they don't have we don't have a like we said, bechar v'loy safek. Since the Torah says bechar, that tells you not a safek, and that's coming to exclude a case that was be'etzem a safek, that was never known who was the bechar. So Rava was masking to this. He said, "Hadar uki Rava amoira aleh." Rava appointed a speaker to clarify what he had originally said and say that he's chayzer from what he said. V'darish dvarim shamati lechem toyasem biyadi. What he had originally said, that was born b'michvah, that they could write a harsha, is ein chanami incorrect. That we darsh from bechar, that the Torah says bechar v'lei safek, that you can't make a harsha because they're not entitled to it. If it's an intrinsic safek at the time of birth, then they're precluded. He's precluded from the bechar. He doesn't get the pishnaim. It's not a question just of proving it or getting it from the brother. The Torah doesn't provide it to him. But But if he wasn't a Safek b'shas Maisa, so he was already entitled to the Bechar, and like the Mefarshim explained, like we said before, a Bechar, the Pishnayim, he's entitled to immediately. It comes automatically. It's not just when they're chaylik. But loyhukru ain't kaisun harshaz elazeh. Loyhukru, the case of a mikveh in a chanami, they can't write one for each other. Okay.
So the pasuk of Bechar B'lai Safek that we were trying to exclude. What at the end? What was the last
this case that Rav had originally said? We're born in hiding, so we taka don't know who's the Bechar. So it's a real suffix. It's a intrinsic suffix, an inherent suffix. But in a case where the suffix came later, then you can write Harsha because it's not that the Torah there, then exclude that. Shochuloi b'nei Akra the Agma l'Shmuel. The residents of Akra Agma sent to Shmuel. Yalandeinu Rabbeinu hayu muchzokin b'zeh shehu b'char. Now we're going to be talking about the idea of when a father identifying a b'char. We had a chazaka about Reuven that he was the b'char. V'amru aviv al acher b'charu. And the father popped up and he said, no, Yosef is the b'char. We're not talking about the 12 Shvatim. Yaakov transferred the b'char. We're talking about where Yaakov later on said, no, I was a mistake. Everyone thought that Reuven was the b'char, and even if they paid him, whatever the case was, it's incorrect, and Yosef is the b'char. Mao, what's the din? Do we listen to the father? And does it overcome the chazaka that the previous brother that Reuven was the b'char? Shachelhu said to him, that we don't know, and that we don't know who's really the b'char, and we're going to see in a minute what the reason is. But it's a suffix, and therefore they could write a harsha one to another to take from any other brothers that they could divide the b'char, but neither the b'char identified by his father or the one who had the chazaka is able to be the definitive b'char. Gemara. We're going to see in a minute that this is a machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan whether the identification of a father can overcome a chazaka. So you either say like Rabbi Yehuda or not like Rabbi Yehuda. But why would you say a suffix? So he was mesupik. He wasn't sure what the halacha was, and therefore he left it that we don't know who is really the b'char, and therefore they make a harsha. Mahi. What is machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabban? The Tanya. It comes from the pasuk Yakir. The Torah says, "Kesbchar as ben ahuva hasnu Yakir." You should recognize losses like Pishnaim to give him the double. The b'char gets the double. We say a lashon of Yakir that we recognize. Yakirenu lacherim. That means that the father has the ability to identify to others. That this is to say that this is my b'char. And Zakti Gemara. Mikan Amar Rabbi Yehuda Neman Adam Loim Zebni B'char. A person can say, "This is my son who's a b'char," even keneged a chazaka. And the Gemara says an additional corollary, but not necessarily part of this same discussion. B'shem shenemen adam loim ezeh b'ni b'char. Just like you say, this son is a b'char. Kach nemen adam loim ezeh ben grusha v'zeh ben chalutza. So he could say, "This is my son." Although people have been giving him meiser, and they've been reading him shidduchim to kehanim. Just know that this son of mine, his mother was a grusha chalutza, and he's a chalal, and he's not entitled to the benefits of being a kohen. So Taisus asks, I think it's Taisus, well, how could you bring a raya? One thing to say that someone's a b'char, you're just identifying. You're not taking anything away from anyone. But by saying someone's a ben grusha ben chalutza, you're how do you have a right to say such thing?
Yeah, but if you're able to say that one son is the Bachar, you are taking away from the other son.
I say, but it's yeah, but it's not coming to say that someone is a apostle though. It just it's
Yeah.
designating and a corollary of that. What's going to come out of that, a teitzah of that, is that someone's going to get more money. The way I'll just look at the teitzahs. Tema levishinemen levaker yehinemen gam lipsel lemeshu ben gusha ben chalutza. How could it be? I guess the point is not that one is better than the other, but how could you make that leap to determine that? So he says, "V'yesh leima kimin shenem levaka b'chol ha'inyan haminu hakasav afilu al echad mibanav haktanim." We're saying that he's saying that this son is my bechar. That means he's saying that even if it was younger, this is the bechar, means that his other son is a mamzer. In order for it to be a bechar, it has to be this is not his son.
Oh wow!
So it includes with it the cheshbon that it's already passing. It's a little bit of a reach in my opinion, because it could be saying this is the bechar, this is my bechar, and this other son that you thought was mine is really adopted. I don't know why it has to be it's a mamzer or his puzzle. Yeah, okay. I just thought it was an interesting discussion. But in any case, so that's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. The Chum disagree. They don't hold of this drasha from Yaki Renu to say that the father can identify Kriyagad a Chazaka. Amle of Nachma Yitzchak l'Rava, so Bishlam of Yehuda Hainus of Yakir, and Rabbanon Yakir Lamli. What do the Rabbanon learn from Yakir? B'tzarach HaKeru. He says it's coming to tell you just in general where the father is identifying not Keneged a Chazaka. He says no one knows which is the Bechar, so he's saying this is the Bechar. We're saying that the father could say, no one knows who's the Bechar, I'm telling you it's the Bechar. Even if it's whoever it is. The father has the ability to give to everyone. So it's true he can't do it through Yerusha. He can't say, I want this person to be Yarshan as the Bechar, but he could give him Atana. He could hand over all his, he has a migo. He could say, I could just hand it over to him. So what do we need a pasuk to tell you that he could say that this is the Bechar? So there's a din, a person cannot be makna davar shalom ba'olam. So if the father says, okay, this is going to be my Bechar, I want everyone to know this is my Bechar, and the next day he wins the lottery, he couldn't have been makna to that Bechar when he said, I'm giving everything to, I want him to get Pishnayim. He didn't have it yet. So it wasn't within his kayach. So how could he have a migu for something that he wasn't able to do at the time? Saying he has a migu, he could have said he's the Bechar, and then he could have given him double anyway. Because the migu, he could have given it to him. But he couldn't give something that came later on. Whereas there's only a teretz if you don't hold Adam Makna Davar Shalom Ba'olam, but Rameh says you can. So he could say, I want you to get a Pishnayim, both on whatever I have now, whatever I get later, and Davar Shalom Ba'olam is not a problem. While it's true a person can be Makna Davar Shalom Ba'olam, but that's only if he could have been able to be Maknit at that time. It's a little bit of a alumnus here. But if he wasn't, I don't know if you remember, we've had this svar of kol she'ein bi los. Whenever you can be mix something, then ein bi lamakeves. You have to be able to do it in order for you to be able to say a davar shalom ba'olam is kaina. But when a person is a geisis, he's not able to make any kinyanim because he's handicapped at the time. So he's not able to be makna. So since he's Rameh, even Rameh would be makna on that which he's a geisis. So on that's what we have to say, Yakir, to tell you that the father can say you're Bechar, and both even if you say like Rameir, it's coming to tell you that even if the father acquires something while he's a geisus, he wins the lottery while he's a geisus, which he wouldn't have been able to give at the time of the designation as a bechar, so he doesn't have a migu. But even so, the Torah says he has the ability to say he's the bechar. Tan Rabban, if we knew about someone that he's a bechar, that was the chazak. And the father says, no, someone else is bechar. Nema. He's Neman. So this sounds like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda said, Yaakov tells you, you could be makir, you could designate, the father could designate someone connected the chazak. If you muchzak on someone that he's not bechar, and the father says, the first one is shehu bechar, al achar shehu bechar, he's never. So it's connected chazak. If someone was a muchzak that he's not bechar, he's not neman. So this sounds like the Rabbanan. So the Gemara, Reisha Rabbi Yehuda, the Sefer Rabbanan. The Reisha is going to Rabbi Yehuda, and the Sefer is the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan, Amr benihu. If someone said, "This is my son," Amr avdihu, and then later on, the man said, the person who had said it was my son says, "No, it's not really my son; it's an eved." Ain't a neman. He's not neman because it's, even though he could theoretically say, when I said benihu, I just meant I love him like a son. But no, we don't accept. That's not a likely scenario that a person will call his eved his son. But avdihu v'chazav amar benihu, if he said he was an eved and then later on he said he's my son, neman, that he's neman. The mishnah mashli ka'avda ka'amar, because a person will sometimes say about his son, he's such a good son, he mamish works for me like a slave. The chilufa abeis hameches. However, the opposite din will apply if this is a one-off din. If it happened to have been that the first declaration was made on his IRS form W Eved, where he was al beis hameches, he was going on the beis hameches, and they used to charge an extra charge for avodim. Amar benihu, he said, "This is my son." Because of Amar avdihu, and later on he says, "This is Eved neman." In that case, he's neman, because in this particular case, we believe he was saying it by the taxes to avoid paying the Eved tax. But Amar Avdihu v'chazav Amar Benihu ain't a Neman. Even though we said before that he is Neman under normal circumstances, but the Beis HaMeches, to say that I would just say he works for me like an Eved, and then he's taking the hit of actually paying money on it, it's one thing for a person to give compliments, it's another thing to pay cold hard cash. So therefore he's not Neman. Meisvei. So putting back aside this case of the Beis HaMeches, we're going back to the original din. That person is believed to say that he called his son an Eved, but he's not believed to say that he called his Eved his son. Meisvei. Hayemeshamshe keben. If someone was picking, he was treating him like a father, he was standing up for him and calling, he gave him Rishus Avimayri, Ubava Amar Benihu. And he said, he's my son. And then later on he said, no, he's an Eved. Ain't a Neman. He's not Neman. So that's fine. That's like we said before. If you said he's his son, and then later on he changed to Eved, you don't believe it because you don't call an Eved a son. He's Meshamashim like an Eved, Bava Amar Avdihu, and he said he's an Eved because of Amar Benihu, ain't a Neman. He's not Neman on that. Now that we had said before he is Neman. Right? If he could, sometimes a person will say about his son, and he was not only was he a case where he just gratuitously called him an Eved, but it was talking about where he was like carrying his sedan in the marketplace, which is the work of an Eved. So there's good reason for him to call him an Eved at that time, even though he's the son. So it's shver. He was calling him the Eved of my Meitzah. Meitzah Ma'ar. 100 Meitzah. My Meitzah Ma'ar. What does that mean? Meitzah Avda Kuf Zuzi. It means an Eved worth 100. Meitzah is the way of saying its value. That's the way they called something. So it was. He said this was my Eved worth 100 zuzim. So the Gemara says in that case, that's a designation as an Eved that he can't later on and say I was just calling my son, praising him that he treats me like an Eved, because you don't call and say he's worth $100. That's already too derogatory. Okay, we'll stop over here, and we'll continue Bez Hashem tomorrow. Hopefully, was 8:40 better? Was that a better time for you, Rafal, or is 8:30?
Yes, it's a little more. Yeah, gives you more time. Yeah.
So let's do 8:40 tomorrow, Bez Hashem.
Okay.
Very
Sure.
good.
Sure.